Hey guys, Procreate 5.4 has been released. If you haven't done so already, go to the App Store and hit the update button. The first big update is there are 180 new brushes. So if we go up here to the brush menu, you can see there are 18 new sets here, and within each set there are 10 brushes. Now I haven't tried all these brushes, but there are a few that have stood out to me. The first brush that I thought was really cool is here in the ink section, the Jaywalker brush. This brush is really bold and strong, and I think it's really cool for like cartooning. Another brush that's really cool is up here in the charcoal section. I really like the Firetail brush. It's really buttery smooth and has a really nice texture. The other brush I liked was down here in the grunge section, the Paragon brush. So it allows you to put down kind of like a comic book screen tone, but it's a little bit natural and grungy as well. So that's really, really cool. Before we go any further, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Jay. I'm a digital designer and illustrator from Sydney, Australia. I do a mix of landscape painting and urban sketching. If you want to see more, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. I also have a Procreate community on Patreon, the Drawing Club, where you can get access to Procreate resources, bonus in-depth videos, and join in my monthly drawing challenges. Check it out at patreon.com/Jaywalker pictures, and I hope to see you there. Now you might be wondering what happened to the old brushes, but if we go up here to the brush library, don't worry, you can actually access them just by pinching. And you can see here, now we've got brush libraries, which is the second big update. Here is the classic library, and that's where all our original brushes are held. Now in the old Procreate, because we only had one library, I had all my default brushes here, and then I'd have all my custom brush sets here. So you can see I've got my sketching brush set open here. I also have some experiments down here. And it's just kind of messy, right? Like I've got my defaults mixed in with my custom sets. So let me go out and let's create a new library. And let me call this Jay's library. And let's try moving stuff in. Let's just try cleaning this up. So let me grab my sketching brush set. I'm going to hold down on it and let's start moving it around. And then I'm going to pinch, and then I'm going to go into my new brush set and then drop it right here. Okay, very nice. So let me go back out again and just repeat that process. Let's bring all of these brush sets over. Okay, so now I've moved them all in. The cool thing is I don't need to name each of these J's, right? So before I was prefixing each of my brush sets with my name so that I knew that these are my brushes, right? But now I can just say, I can just write here, my custom. I can rename each of these. So I can just say sketching. Okay, cool. That is much neater. I'm really excited about this. The third big update is brush file management. And you might be thinking, like, aren't we talking about brush file management right here? But no, brush file management is actually something where we've got to take a step back and think about how brushes are stored inside of Procreate. So in the old Procreate, the only way to get brushes in and out of the app is to import them or to share them. So for example, if I go into my brush library, the only way to import brushes would be to hit import, and the only way to share them would be to, swipe here and share this brush. And when you import the brush files, they're stored within the app. So it's a very opaque process and you can't see what brushes you have. But now your brushes are stored in one of two locations. So either in iCloud or in the files folder on your iPad. And it is great because it gives you options in terms of syncing, backup, and organization. So a good example is, say you get a new iPad, right? And you've got all your brushes here. And the only way for me to move them all across is to go through and share each brush set and then re-import them into your new iPad and your new version of Procreate. But with this new system, when you get a new iPad, you can just bring over the files folder or just sync to iCloud and it'll automatically bring all those brushes into your new iPad and Procreate. Okay, let's zoom out here just so we have a bit of a big picture view. You can see I've got 3 different libraries here, and I read that Procreate will mirror kind of the format or the organization of your brushes here in the library in the file system, whether that be on iCloud or on your iPad. So I moved my old brush sets from the classic library up here into a new library. So I wonder if that's actually mirrored in the Files app. So let's jump into Files and have a look. Okay, I'm here in Files and I've gone to On My iPad, and let me go into the Procreate folder. Let's go to brushes. Oh, awesome. Okay, so here we can see the classic library, the Procreate library, and my custom brushes. So if I go into this, nice. Okay, cool. Now let me try something. Let's say with my sketching brush set, let me rename this BBBBB. Okay. And let's see if that mirrors in Procreate when I go back into it. Let's have a look. It's the sketching. There we go. Okay, cool. So yeah, it renamed it just like what I did in the folder. So yeah, that's super useful. Like it's really clean and just, yeah, you don't have to worry about things getting out of sync. You know what I mean? Okay, I know your time is precious, so let's speed run these next 5 updates. We now have some changes to the way brush sets are named. So you can see here, I'm here in my classic library, and you can see each of the brush sets here, and you can see there's like an icon against each one, and apparently we can change these. So let me try to change it. Yeah, here we go, customize icon, and yeah, now we've got all these options we can choose from. That's really cool. So this is very useful if you're creating your own brush sets. So if I go back to my custom brush sets, you can see here, they all default to the Procreate icon. And that's what happened in the old version, but now I can go and add my own. So I can go here, customize icon. And because this is a sketching brush set, you know, maybe I want to have a pencil. That's pretty cool. The other change is with how emojis are displayed in the brush set name. So if I go up here to my foliage brush and just rename it, and let's give it an emoji. So use this button. Let me just find the tree. Okay. And you could do this in the old Procreate too. That's not a new thing. But when I push apply, you can see here it's put the emoji in the place of the icon. And before it wouldn't do that. It would actually awkwardly put it kind of next to the icon. So apparently I can tap there and I can customize the icon. Let me see if I add an icon, what's going to happen? Yep, okay, so there you go. You've got that awkward indentation, but let me customize it again. How would I remove that? Is there a way to remove it? Okay, so you just tap it again. So this activates it. And if you want to remove it, just tap it again. And it disappears. The next update is that brush search has been added. So apparently if I just pull down here, oh, there you go. Now we can search for our brushes and, you know, I can search for triangle. There's my triangle brushes. Very nice. And apparently I can search for emojis as well. So, I mean, if I search for my tree, there you go. It's searching for the brush set. And I'm assuming that if I gave my individual brushes emojis as well, they would appear there too. Next, we have a few small tweaks to the color palette. So let me pull it up here. And apparently, when I make it into the color companion, the color history now appears here above my save palette. So you can see the history here. And apparently I can access this regardless of screen size. So I'm on an iPad 12.9 inch, so that's not an issue for me. But on smaller iPads, apparently this wasn't visible before. But now there should be a little ellipsis that you can hit that will allow you to switch between the history and the active palette. Now they did also say there's some UI changes to the color palette panel, but I couldn't really spot any except for these rounded corners here on the swatches. The next update enables time-lapse recordings on very small canvases. So you can see here, I've got a 64 by 64 pixel canvas that I created before I updated Procreate. And if I click on this one and I go up here to the wrench icon and video, you can see the video settings are all grayed out. But if I go back to my gallery and create a new canvas, let's make it 64 by 64, create. And if I draw something, let's draw a smiley face and go up here to the wrench icon, you can see here now I can play it back and it is recording. For update number 8, the reference companion bug is finally fixed. So you can see here I've got my reference companion open and I've imported an image that's pure green. And what would happen in the past is if I color picked this and then applied it to my canvas, the two colors would be different. Let's try this time around. Let's see if it's actually fixed. So I'm going to apply this here. And then I'm going to open up my color picker. And you can see those RGB values here that are from the reference companion. Now I'm going to color pick the color I applied and it should stay the same. Awesome. Okay, cool. All right, guys, I've saved the best for last, Brush Studio settings. So I'm going to go through each setting and explain what they mean for you. So let's dive in. I've got a demo brush set here and I'm going to use these brushes to explain some of these concepts. All right, so I'm just going to jump into this triangle brush here and here is our Brush Studio. So the first change is here in stroke path. You can see I've got 3 new options here, spacing jitter, jitter lateral and jitter linear. And before this was just one setting, jitter. And what jitter basically does is it kind of randomizes the placement of your stamp. But now with these 3 new settings, we can fine tune that placement of the stamp a little more. So if I move spacing jitter, basically what this is doing is randomizing the space between each stamp. And you can see as I move this, the stamps are getting more stretched out and being placed randomly relative to each other. Jitter lateral randomizes the stamp perpendicular to the stroke path. So you can see now we're moving outwards. This is the stroke path, and instead of following that path, we're going perpendicular to that path. And then jitter linear, I think, randomizes it in the general direction of your stroke. So you can see it's still relatively constrained to that stroke path, but you'll notice, for example, here, you can see some strays coming out. A cool thing you can do is actually have the jitter respond to the amount of pressure or tilt in your brush. So if I increase jitter lateral like this, let's increase it to max. And then if I go here, and you can see I've got different options here. And here is the pressure sensitivity option. I can turn that on, and it's giving me a pressure curve. And so I'm going to give it my typical pressure curve. And what this means is when I press lightly, not much ink is going to come out. But as I press harder and harder, it's going to ramp up and get really dark fast. But the key thing to remember is this pressure curve is controlling the amount of jitter that occurs, not the amount of ink that comes out, I guess you could say. So if I close this, you can see in the brush preview that the stroke is kind of really tight together. And then as we go further through the stroke, it becomes more and more scattered. And you can see here, as I do it here, I'm pressing harder and the jitter is increasing, scattering the stamp all over the place. But then as I press lighter, it becomes one single stroke. This could be useful, say, if you had a star stamp and you wanted to draw kind of shooting stars, and then they come out and explode everywhere. And then as you want them to become more tight and together, you lighten your stroke. And then if you want to spread them out again, just increase the pressure. You can also do the same with tilt. So if I turn this off and I change it to tilt instead, then I reduce my tilt down to about 15 degrees, you'll see that if I draw perpendicular to this screen, it's just like a typical stamp, but as I tilt the brush, more and more of that jitter comes into play. To show you the next setting, I'm going to change brushes. So let me go up here and I'm going to choose this brush, and it's just a round stamp. So see, it's just stamping on a round circle. Now the new setting is down here in shape, and if I scroll down, you can see there are two of them. There's roundness vertical jitter and roundness horizontal jitter. So if I increase this, you can see it's applying a transform to the stamp to squash it. And you can see it's not uniformly squashing all the stamps, it's just squashing some of the stamps, whereas others remain wider, and they're not all squashed at the same amount. This is more squashed than this one. Similarly, if I turn this down and if I do horizontal jitter, it's squishing them on a different axis. And so as I draw those stamps, you notice how they're just changing their squishiness. And you can play with that, and you can also adjust it based on the pressure curve as well. So, if I do this, now my pressure is going to control how much these stamps are being jittered. So if I press lightly, the stamps look normal, but if I press harder, they start to jitter and get squished. Now you might be wondering, what's the point of these settings? They're so niche and detailed, but let me give you an example. So I've got a leaf brush here, and you can see it's just printing on a stamp and kind of randomizing the rotation and size like so. And I was doing this because I wanted to draw some trees and just have a really natural looking leaf texture and pattern. But now with this new setting, what I can do is I can go inside, max out the vertical and horizontal jitter. And now when I draw with it, you can see the leaves look much more natural. So what's happening is the stamp is randomly being squished on two different axes, and it's making it look like it's kind of 3D, right? Now it looks much more like leaves that are rotating in a three-dimensional space versus just a flat plane stamp of a leaf that's being rotated in one 2D axis, if that makes sense. Okay, to demonstrate the next setting, I'm going to go into my previous brush here, and I'm going to adjust the spacing so we're a bit closer together. And you can see we're just drawing a stamp like this, right? Now the setting in question is actually here in Dynamics. This is a new setting, spacing. So what this is doing is basically adjusting the spacing between the stamps depending on the speed of your brush. So now if I go here, I'm just moving at a constant speed here, and the stamp is all equally spaced, right? And then if I increase my speed, notice how now the distance between the stamps is increasing, and I can control that with the speed. For the next setting, let's go back to our leaf brush, and I'm going to clear this, and let me just paint on the leaves. So you can see I've got a very smooth image, and you can see how like the leaves are kind of more transparent or lighter as we go out, and the image itself is very smooth and crisp. Now let's go into the settings of this brush, and the new setting in question is actually here in the rendering section. So if we look down here, it's called alpha threshold, and this basically controls how much anti-aliasing is applied to the stamp in our brush. So let me turn this on, and let's set this to about 46%. And now if I paint with it, you can see the difference. So these leaves are all pixelated, whereas these ones are kind of all soft and smooth and clean. This setting is really useful if you want to get a really grungy brush that has kind of a pop art vibe, or just a really bold and strong contrasting look. Finally, we've made it to the last setting and the end of the video, and it's this setting down here, which is preview. This is a whole new section, and it just allows you to control the brush preview here, or the thumbnail, I guess you could call it. So right now it's displaying kind of an example of the stroke of this leaf brush, but I can change it just to the stamp preview itself. So it's kind of small there, but you can see there's a tiny little stamp being shown. But I think for this brush, it's better to show the brush stroke. And then you can adjust the size at which you want the preview to show. So imagine if I was using it at max size, it would look like this. At 35%, it would look like this. Maybe this is more like the ideal size that I would want you to use it at. And then also the pressure minimum. So you can set it to the ideal pressure amount that you want it to look like in your brush preview. And there's a couple of other settings you can use to adjust how it looks, and just to make your brush preview look actually like the brush that a user is going to get. Okay, so this wraps up my in-depth look at Procreate 5.4. If you got value from this video, please make sure to like it and leave a comment below. And if you want to learn more Procreate tips and also learn how to draw in Procreate, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye.